Innovators! Welcome to Who's Next, Innovators Edition, powered by the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. I am your host, Martin G. Martin II, the Senior Program Director of Innovation Entrepreneurship, also known as I&E. The Thurgood Marshall College Fund champions the ambitions of scholars and innovators of HBCUs and PBIs to produce the next generation of top talent. Who's Next Innovators Edition aims to highlight Black entrepreneurs and HBCU innovators through educational and authentic conversations. I'm excited to invite a few of our I&E alums to kick off these conversations, so let's see who's next.
Welcome, Kory. We're super excited to be having you here and what we're going to be talking about today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. It's exciting, and I'm ready to hop into it.
Let's do it. And we have our lovely Tamaria co-host with us today.
Oh, there you go with the full names, Nina Simone. I'm super excited to join you and have this conversation with what I understand is one of the most well-known entrepreneurs in the PG County.
I like to say DMV. Let's extend it out a little bit, but
okay.
Prince George's County, we can start there too.
Okay. So tell us a bit about your backstory to the point that you're now leading a business that is well known throughout the DMV.
So, grew up in the Washington metropolitan area, the DMV, as we call it now today, as an athlete.
Okay.
My whole life, from the age of probably 7 years old to 13. I was a basketball player, actually a really good basketball player, I like to add. I went to St. John's College High School in DC. I had an amazing time there. We'll get into that later on. But went to St. John's as a basketball player, left out of there a football player, right? So
transition.
Major transition in high school.
Yeah.
Junior year, started playing football, became halfway decent at it, got a full scholarship at Eastern Michigan University. Went to Eastern Michigan, 4-year starter, had an incredible time. Like everybody's college experience should be.
Right.
But I like to think that my time at Eastern was incredible. We held the longest losing streak in NCAA history.
Okay, that's a little different. Usually it's
The other way.
we brag about the
Right.
other, but
Yeah.
that's okay. This is part of the story.
We talk about it because, it's one of those things that you fail and you learn how to fail so you don't
Right.
go back to doing those same things.
Right.
So went to Eastern, had a tough time there on the field, but had this incredible life experience. After that, went undrafted to the Carolina Panthers. Another incredible experience, right? Getting the opportunity to play, a sport at the highest level. It's humbling. You're thankful. It's like your whole life. It's kind of coming to fruition. Then you get cut, right? And then you're at home. You're on the way home in a middle seat on an American Airlines flight. And back then, I was like 330 pounds. So kind of give you context, it's not comfortable. And then you get home and you really got to start your life as a professional.
You just touched upon so many things, failure,
Yeah.
resilience, the power of the pivot.
Yeah.
You saw yourself as an athlete and now your identity is changing. Talk to us about the transition from being an athlete to being a business owner.
The transition was tough, right? I mean, I can tell you when I got home, when I realized my athletic career was over, I was depressed. I was depressed. I was, in my parents' house in the basement, just like, oh man, my life's world's over. And the transition started because I realized that I could still be an athlete, just in a different arena, right? I could take my competitiveness, I could take my grit, I could take my commitment, and I could take all that to the professional world. Once I figured that out, with the lesson that I had learned about not, in my opinion, I wasn't committed enough to my craft. That's why I didn't make it, right? When you talk about your number 54 out of 53, that's commitment to me. So once I realized that, take the commitment, double down, and then that's how I become the hardworking professional I am today.
All right, and tell us about this background of the business and what it is and what you do.
So we are a full-service transportation company. So everything related to trucks and school buses, anything that gets in the way on the road, as I like to say, I sell, lease, service, etc. We are probably the 50th largest, minority-owned company in the United States. We do over $100 million in sales every year. Kudos to my team. We just eclipsed $1 billion for sales last year.
Wow, with a B.
With a B.
With a B.
Yeah. So we're it's humbling, it's exciting, but now that just puts the expectation even bigger as we go forward. We do everything in the commercial transportation side, from electric school bus to electric trucks to leading innovation. Like we are really on the cutting edge of everything transportation.
Oh, that's super impressive. A question I would have is, how does your company stay in the know on what's next and happening in the industry of trucking? Is it market research?
It's a little bit of everything. If you think about transportation today, I think it's hot, right? It's one of those things where people really don't think about transportation, right? It just kind of happens. Everything here got here via a truck at some point. Everybody, watching this and in this room, but they rode a school bus before, right? So transportation is everywhere. Go get food, etc. So the way you stay on the cutting edge is you got to be in it. I am committed to, traveling the world, learning what new people are doing, taking ideas. There's nothing like a good idea from somewhere else and replicating it. That's what I do, right?
Right.
I like to consider myself an innovator. I just consider myself a studier, right? I'm studying things that work, and then I'm coming back and I'm exciting my people, showing them success stories, and then we implement, we perfect, we commit, and then we deliver to the customer.
So I want to focus on something you just said about being an innovator and really studying your market. So specifically, what would you say are like the top 3 things that you would suggest really give a business owner that edge when it comes to studying the market and then implementing that in their business?
I think it first starts with people, right? I can't leave the building to go improve the business unless somebody's running my business, right? At the end of the day, we sell service to our customers. We have to deliver on that promise. So if I don't have people that can do that, I can't grow the business. Next thing is being able to step outside of your industry and trying to look at other industries and putting that on top. I'm huge on saying, well, what is the hotel industry doing and how do they pivot in their side? Well, how did the food market pivot? How did, airplanes pivot? Well, then I take all that stuff and I come back to inside of my organization and say, well, hell, we're selling trucks and school buses. We need to make this pivot. We need to make that pivot. I think the next thing is just putting yourself in a place where you're a little bit uncomfortable. I'm very, person that's laid back, reserved, but I know that for my organization to grow, I have to be in uncomfortable places. I have to push out, I have to be in conversations. You have to be there, because if you're not present in the moment and you're not in the moment at the right place and time, you don't get it. You just don't get the opportunity.
You touched on pivot, and I know that this was a really big pivot that a lot of business owners or just businesses in general with the pandemic happened. Were there any key takeaways or any things you did to develop yourself as a leader, and then, of course, now as a student, because now you're learning your industry, your company all over again?
The pandemic was tough. If you just kind of look from a standpoint of the depth, the totality, and as it still continues today, our organization was hit harder than I think a lot of people understand. If you just think about the standpoint that we sell, and half of my business is dedicated to schools, and schools were shut down for 18 months. That takes 50% of my business out the window, right? So now, what do I do for my employees? How do we pivot? How do we double down? How do we keep people employed? How do we make sure we keep the doors open? Like, those are conversations we're having every single day inside of our organization. So, what I learned about that is that we got grit, right? That, old-fashioned thing that your parents teach us a long time ago that kind of got handed down. I learned that we're resilient, right? I learned that we're dynamic inside of our organization, right? We can change on a pivot to make sure we survive. And that's the tough thing about being an entrepreneur that people don't talk about. You see, it's good, you get to create your own schedule, et cetera, but when you lose 50% of your sales and you got to buy COVID tests so your people can come to work, you got to put up partition blinds so people don't get sick, you got to pay people when they're sick and they're home, it's tough. And you got to figure out a way. And I think that's what I learned. Yeah. It's just that we'll figure out a way.
So, at TMCF, everything that we do in our programming really is focused on our students and our students' growth and development. And something you just talked about there about really looking at a situation and what you can learn from that situation. Looking back at the 18-year-old Korey, who's having a very good time in college, with the knowledge you have now as an entrepreneur, would you have decided to be an entrepreneur at 18?
At 18, my life was so center focused around playing sports. I don't think I had the maturity to even think about being an entrepreneur. For me, it was, I'm going to be a professional athlete. No way, no doubt. if I could go tell myself something, I would tell myself, Korey, do you really understand what commitment is, right? And I'm huge on commitment because I failed at it, right? So anything you fail at, you kind of make sure you don't do that again. So I would say, Korey, are you committed? Next, are you focused? And when I say being focused, do you know where you want to go, right? Do you have a clear path, or do you know you're going to go? And then the third thing I'll follow in there is intentful, right? Are you intentful about the route that you're going to take to go there? If you don't have a goal, if you're not focused, if you're not committed, and you don't have any intent, the talent in the world is too good, right? We used to live in a world where, people knew and people didn't know. Well, the internet changed that. Everybody can know something if you look for it. So for me, you got to really be about your commitment. You got to be about being focused, and you got to be intentful in everything you do. That's what I tell my 18-year-old self.
Well,
That was
seems,
good.
I know,
Yeah.
but it seems like if you told your 18-year-old self, those are many of the same things you're doing now as a business owner. So there's that transferability between, what you were doing in college to what you're doing now.
Right. So it's one of those things where you look back and say, but I won't make the mistake again.
Yeah, but I mean, up front you talked about failure and you talked about learning from those mistakes. What would you say has been one of your biggest failures as a business owner?
I think my biggest failure as a business owner is not leaning into being a business owner.
What does that mean?
Right. So when you work for a corporation, at the end of the day, you can go somewhere else. I had to really embrace the idea that, my employees are my employees, right? My decisions affect that they can go home and provide for their families. And when you take on that responsibility, it's a lot. You're 25 years old and you're leading an organization and you're leading people. Well, that's one thing, but to put that responsibility on yourself, it's a whole different level of, there's no choice, right? Just like during COVID, there was no choice for me to figure out. So I think, the biggest failure I had is just really leaning into my role and just saying, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be good at it. I'm going to commit to it. And that was probably the largest failure I've had thus far.
So you said 25 years old. So you were 25 when you moved into the current role that you have now?
26, 27.
Okay, what was the structure? What was that transition? Like you just woke up one day and said, at 26,
You said
I'm
you're
gonna go
on
run
the
this
plane
company.
home.
No, it's, I'm really fortunate to have, a family and a mentor group that is earned, not given. Like everything in our family has always been, you earn it, you get it. You work, it comes. So when I tell you my first job at the dealership was doing oil changes and sweeping the floors, that was my first job. When I tell you I had the smallest store with the worst hours, night shift, like that was all part of that process. And that's kind of developed me into having the opportunity. The next became the results, right? You got to perform. Like the business has to perform at the end of the day. And I mean, that was hard. It was, it's just hard to get results in an economy and that's tough. And then, you kind of go through these different phases and, before you know it, you're like 26, 27, and you're like, man, I can actually get this done. Like I can lead this company. And that's when my father came to me and said, son, at this point, you can lead the company better than I can. And that's the only reason why you're getting this opportunity. Wow. And it was, that year was a huge transition for me. I got married that next year, just a whole lot of pivoting life moments, in that 18-month period.
So a question for you. You mentioned your dad and you were talking about mentorships, mentors. Did your dad play a pivotal role in being a mentor for you, or were there other?
Man, a mentor is a light word, I think. My dad's my greatest champion.
Wow.
Right? He's the guy that if I'm up here, he's down here, right? Hey, you're up here, I get it, but let's be real. When I'm down here, he's got pulling me up, right? He's that guy. He's in my corner every single day in his life. He talks about how he dedicates it to his kids, and he does it every single day. My dad doesn't have to do anything anymore, but comes to work every single day, sets the example, and he just does it at a rate that's incredible. So when you talk about mentors, I've had incredible coaches and teachers and stuff like that, but from a foundational level, I so much credit to those two people.
Wow, that's really awesome to hear that you had that supportive and, as you said, champion of network rooting you on. How would you advise students that may not have that foundation or upbringing or coming? How can they seek out mentorship, or what should be their strategy?
I think mentorship is tough, right? Because the world today, in my opinion, a lot of people have say they've done stuff that really haven't done it yet, right? And that's tough to decipher, right? You gotta really be intentful and focused on, okay, I'm 18 or I'm 20, and in 5 years I want to be here. I'm looking for a 25-year-old to a 30-year-old that's done this, 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 and this, and I can check that and I can vet that, right? If I can't check it and I can't vet it, it's not real. Because I can tell you, some people tell me that there's a book or, you know, a 20-step process that you sign up right now, you buy.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm telling you, I wish I could find it, because I would go buy it. I mean, I want to give it to my organization. I want to grow quick and fast. So I think it's really hard to find a mentor, but what I would say is once you find one, to respect their time, right? If you're going to do something, do it. If you're going to be somewhere, be it. And, you know, just don't waste time. And it happens naturally, right? I mean, just don't pick it because it looks cool, but pick it because they invest in you, and they care enough about seeing you succeed.
So I want to explore that a little bit more. Like, how specifically do you do that vetting? I mean, in this day and age, you just Google, you're going to get the same names, but how do you really do the homework to find out that this is the type of mentor that would be best for where you are in your career, or where you want to be in your career?
I think it takes time, right? You know, we live in like a microwave world, right? Oh, I met you today at a gala. You're my best friend. You're going to take me through how to make a ton of money. It doesn't work like that. It takes time. You got to get to know someone,
Building relationships.
right? You got to be authentic, because people can fake it for a long time, right? Whether it's in relationship, life, workplace, mentor, you can fake it for a long time, but eventually your true self comes out, right? It just naturally does. So I would just be patient with the relationship, let the relationship, you know, go through a maturation process, because then there's real input, right? There's real care, there's real love. That's where you get to a point.
So you talked about being at events, going to galas, other networking events. You talked about giving it time, listening, active listening. What other kind of advice would you give specifically to position yourself, again, for our audience, students, to position yourself to meet the people that potentially could become your mentors?
I think you got to be in the places where you think they're going to be, right? And a mentor or a mentee relationship, it doesn't have to be, well, I just want to go talk to the person who has the largest truck dealership in the United States, right? It doesn't have to be that real. You know, a mentor could be the person who cleans the floors at your organization. A mentee or mentor could be the person that you see every day at Starbucks, and you're asking them, man, how did you get here? You know, you're here every single day, right? I think there's so much to learn from so many people, and everybody has an incredible story. It's just about, you know, leaning into it and saying, you know what, I'm going to get to know this person because I see them as being successful. They're going to help me along my journey, right? In this journey of stories and input and day-to-day activity, it's a journey. One mentor isn't going to be like the end-all be-all.
Kory, I actually want to go back to a point Nina Simone brought up about the role that your parents played. And while that's an amazing support system, that also has to be a very heavy weight to carry at times.
It's called a burden.
Well,
No.
It's called a burden.
So sometimes it is a burden
Yes.
that you inherit certain opportunities. For some of our students, they may be in the position that they have parents or other people in their network that are doing that, and for some no. What are the pros and cons of continuing in the family business, especially when we think about really generational wealth in communities of color and maybe the responsibility one feels with that? So as you were going through that, what really were those pros and cons?
I think it's unique. I have an older sister, right, who isn't in the family business, right? So when I made my decision to go into the family business, I was like, man, I really got to think about what I'm signing up for. I like to go backwards and say my dad is, you know, let's say late 60s. I'm not going to put his age out there, but that kind of takes us back to almost 1950, right? So my grandmother has got to be born in the early 1900s. But there was no opportunity for her to have her own business. Like my father's generation was the first real generation to start generational wealth and legacy for the African American community. So when you take that type of, hard work, sacrifice, dedication, and now the ball's on your court, you almost feel as if you have to, right? Now, you can look at it as, man, I got to do this, or you can say, this is a hell of an opportunity. I can change the world with this opportunity. I can change the world for my family. I can change the world for my community. I can change the world for the people that work for me. And once you lean into it, it doesn't become that burden and responsibility so much. It just becomes what fuels you. Like I'm fueled by changing the world. Like when people would say, hey, Korey, what's your thing? I want to give back more to the world than I take from it, right? It's no longer about Kory Neal, my little family, or it's like, I'm thinking so big these days because I realize that I got an incredible foundation. Now, what am I going to build on top of it?
It's so interesting you say that because I've heard this quote about building upon shoulders of giants. And that's who we want to become. We want to become the giants so that people can build on the shoulders of us. A question I have for you, given the legacy of your family, what are some different strides that you're making in regards to the people that are to come in the community and your workers and things of that sort? What are some of those?
I really didn't understand that until I had kids. Right? I got 2 sons, and it's like, oh, wow, this is bigger than you at this point, i.e., you can't mess this up because you got to make sure whatever he has. And so I really didn't understand it, but I think what I've learned is that if you just say committed and consistent in what you do, like
consistent,
super consistent. I am my schedule. Every single day I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm downstairs working out by 4:30. I'm at the job by 6 o'clock every single day. I go to sleep at 9 p.m. Like I am consistent in everything I do because I know that if I'm consistent and committed, the law of time, I'm going to outwork everybody, right? I'm not the smartest person in the room ever. I can't read the fastest. I can't do any of that. So it's just time in my craft. I'm putting in the 10,000 hours. That's
how many years have you all been open?
17.
So when you think about sustainability, it's that consistency of the day to day that really has led to the legacy that you're building.
I think it's consistency, but it's also sacrifice, right? You really can't get it done if you're trying to do something else. I know we're in a world of you got your main thing, you got your side hustle. I don't have any time for side hustles. I have no time for side hustles.
You are fully committed.
I am in it. It's like everything I do because I know if I'm not, somebody is. Competition is out there, and I'm not going to be beat by competition because I was doing this or doing that or doing that. Like I am in it all the time.
A question, because what I've gained from your story is, especially you being a student athlete in your younger years, and how that the consistency, the committed, the teamwork, how that's transitioned into your life now in your full-time work. But what about people or students that might not play a sport? Like, what are some things they could get involved in, or are there certain books? Like, I know you can't teach hard work, but what are some things they can start to do to gain these qualities and skills? Yeah.
I think they got to understand their why, right? And that's tough, being 17, 18, 20 years old. Understanding your why. Why are you here? What's your purpose? What's going to inspire you every single day, whether good, bad, or indifferent? Like, understanding your why is so important because you're going to hit disadvantages, right? I can tell you the world is not fair, it is not equal, right? So when you go out in the real world, you gotta have something in you that grounds you, that makes it worth it every single day. So if I could say anything, is understand your why. And once you understand your why, then now you just gotta go get it. That's just the time.
Time to get it.
Time to get it. Well, I know that when we think about the opportunities that we provide for our students, we want to focus on really an understanding of who they are, understanding their why, the skills they have. What are other experiences that you had? Clearly, we know you being an athlete was a part of it, but what are other experiences that you took advantage of or you missed out on that you really believe helped make you successful in that transition into entrepreneurship?
I think understanding the value of a community is an experience. I keep a close knit around people. Like if you're around me, you've been around me for a very long time, right? I'm just very keen on that because I want people to hold me accountable, right? I want people that are there that just aren't here when, oh, we've hit $1 billion of sales, let's go out. No.
Right.
Come back when I was, in my room crying, right? Come back to that Korey. Hold me accountable. I was listening to something the other day and they were talking about you finally made it and now you want to take a break. No, right? It just gets harder. It just gets harder and you just got to double down on your commitment. So just really understanding that and running that course, I think is huge for any kid today.
One of the things that we talk about in our programming is connection. And I think that you just really amplify the power of the connections that you have, the network that you've built. How do you translate that into how you run your business and how you manage people and all the various parts of your business and the connections that it take to make everything run seamlessly?
Running seamlessly is a stretch. I like to say that. But I think that when I look at my organization, we represent, male, females. We have people that from their 20s up to their 70s. So we're talking about, 50 years of you got 50, somebody that's 70 years old and 20 years old, try to create a culture, right? That's very hard. So I think what you gotta do is you just gotta stay focused on the simple stuff, right? We can get big with ideas, we can get big with, but sometimes I think if you're just staying tight on the simple stuff and being really close to the fundamentals of your business, being close to the fundamentals of people, understanding what motivates people, understanding, human behavior. I think when you kind of play in that realm, I think naturally you can build a team. And when you have a team, you build a culture. And at the end of the day, I think we talked about it earlier, if you got a team, you can grow. If you don't have a team, it's only you.
So let's talk about team, because that's core to when we're doing our pitch competitions, we talk about team dynamics. How do you pick the people and get the best out of them on your team?
I think first is, I'm a believer that people pick themselves, right?
I
people,
agree.
Some eliminate themselves too.
Right, very true, right? And some people fire themselves as well. But I think that people pick themselves because I believe in leading without authority, right? And that's something like if you're walking in the hallway and there's trash on the floor, pick it up, right? That's the type of leadership that I'm about. Now, some people, you need to have degrees and all that stuff. That's great. But I'm simple. I'm basic, right? I want people that lead when opportunity arises, right? If, there's a fire, hey, I'm calling this fire. I'm doing this. So I think the way you pick people is you see them act, right? I see them act and I get input from other people, right? If I picked everybody based through Korey's lens, there'd be 1,000 Koreys running around the dealership, right? I don't need 1,000 Koreys. I need Koreys, I need Johns, I need Brittany's, I need Michelle's, I need Janine's, I need Marsha's, I need Chuck's, I need...
Understanding the importance of diversity,
Oh my
of
God.
perspective and skill set, it sounds like.
Everything. If you don't have it, it's just Korey's way of doing things, and it won't take you far.
A question I have is in regards to other business ventures that you might have stepped into, and I don't want to say we're not successful, but not successful, and what were like your key takeaways and how did you apply it back to your trucking company?
I think, there's been a couple ventures where maybe I invested or maybe I put my time into it, but what I really realized is that it's hard to do two things at once. Like it's just really hard, it's easy to invest in something, right? But to like really engage, the details, make the meetings, be there, it's hard. So you can make this decision where you can kind of be half in on this, half in on that, and kind of straddle the line through life. Or you can say, you know what, I'm gonna run this route. I'm gonna be dedicated to this route. And that doesn't mean I might not get off this road at some point, but right now I'm gonna be really focused right here. And at the end of the day, if everybody straddle a line and I'm focused on the line, I'm gonna get there quicker. Right. So I think what I've learned is stay in your lane, be focused, be committed, and just the law of time.
So Korey, I have a question. How do you think, or do you think, the transportation industry can impact kind of the educational community?
I think, if you look at transportation in a totality, it's huge. right? If you talk about, right now we're running around with dirty, quote unquote, diesel vehicles, and now we're making this transition into clean, zero emission electric. That's already making it safer for kids, right? It's making it safer for universities. That's making it safer for the world. I think also understanding the dealership model has to change. We no longer can just sell a product. We have to sell a service, a turnkey solution where we're helping with routing and logistics to make sure that every kid has an opportunity to get where they need to be. We're helping with fuel and emissions and I think it's just a whole circuit that we have to look at and encompass to be able to say, you know what, transportation just isn't moving product. Transportation is actually moving the world.
You touch on an interesting point, Korey, in regards to like you're now innovating your business model. So you're going from the traditional trucks into electric and zero emissions. But to take a step back, and especially from the student perspective, being in some of our different pitch competitions, we may be just first pitching this idea. It might be something that's just coming to mind. What's some advice that you would give to students in that perspective, either gems, advice, on how to pitch their business model?
I think when you want to pitch your business model, when you want to sell your business model, if you want to make a business plan, the first thing you got to understand is who's doing that well already, right? If we're going to be quick, if this is going to be quick and we're going to make a quick pitch, I want to know who's doing it well, how are they doing it well, and then I'm trying to figure out who they have on their team so I can bring them on my team as soon as I can.
No poaching of teams in the competition, Korey.
I'm just saying, right? So now I got an opportunity to know what people are doing well, get them on my team. Now I can build them because I got vision. I see my way of doing it. I got a Korey perspective. They got their perspective, and boom, now that's something special.
So at TMCF, we really champion the ambition of our scholars and innovators. And so what gems would you give them to really help them along the way?
I think, a gem would be to understand your why, right? Understand why you come to work, why you want to do what you want to do. And understand next the level of commitment it's going to take to get to that why, right? Those two important things. But then, something that people can forget about, because on your path to success, when you're making it big, when it's going right, is be humble, right? Understand humility, make sure that you're going back and you're helping that community that meant so much to you back then, pulling them up, right? I mean, taking them with you, pulling them up so they have an opportunity. Understand your give back, right? We all have an obligation to give back to our community. At Korey Neal, we partner a lot with Shabab. We partner a lot in the Washington metropolitan area with a lot of different foundations because we realize that we got to take care of our associates, with our people, we got to take care of our customers, but at the end of the day, we got to take care of our community.
So Korey, circling back to the legacy piece, now that you have your sons, what are you focused on in building for them?
Options. Plain and simple. I want to instill in my kids a level of hard work, a level of humility, a level of faith, a level of love, emotional intelligence. I want to install those things in my kids, right? With my wife, of course. She's got a whole different set of skills that the kids are going to get, but that's what I want to give them. And at the end of the day, I want to give them the ability to discern options, right?
So that's interesting because I thought you would say, I want to prepare them to run this business. But instead you were focused on developing them as individuals. When you think about passing on the business, are you automatically thinking about them as your successors, or are you preparing your business model for whoever may come after you?
My oldest son is 2. My other one is
so we have
6
time.
months.
We have some time.
Right. But it's funny, my 2-year-old comes to the dealerships and it's like, Daddy's going to work to fix the trucks. Like he sees it. So no, I think I'm preparing this business to be as great as it is in this moment. Right. We don't know what 25 years is going to look like. We don't know, but I know that if I create options, whether that's this business, that business, or whether we buy more stores, we scale, we go global, we go national, we go coastal, I'm going to provide options, because at the end of the day, having capital is critically important to be able to have options. So it's upon me to make sure that those 2 individuals, my 2 sons, have the ability but also have the foundation to be able to handle options. Because if they can't handle it, it doesn't work.
I think you touched on a really good point about, and even just you mentioning your son being 2, and because of his exposure, he's already understanding what you do. Maybe not full scale and calling business meetings, but in the sense of he knows what you're doing. It's the exposure, being in the environment. And although you don't run a $50 million company or you don't have the most creative app, is being in that environment and exposure. Would you agree that?
Yeah, I agree so much. Funny story. So there's I tell people this all the time. My dad used to go to Virginia Beach, right? That was like our little weekend getaway. He had this big old Caprice Classic, and we drive down to Virginia Beach. And back in the day, you had those big bag cell phones. And kid, you almost sleep in the car. But my dad used to make me listen to his conversations.
Wow.
He would make me listen to all these. He'd be calling people for 4 hours, just banging out calls. And now I look back and I hear myself talking like him. I hear, the verbiage. I hear myself like, man, that's what he was preparing me for.
Yeah.
So when I think about my 2 sons, I want them to see me, right? I want my sons to see me making a site. I want my sons to see me being an incredible husband to their mom. I want my sons to see me waking up early, going to work. I want my sons to see me doing whatever it takes to make them successful, so that they understand that, okay, life is good, but we're working for this. So that's really important for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That level of exposure, I think, really is why we wanted to have this conversation with you, right? Because when we focus on our students at Thurgood Marshall College Fund, we want them to know that they have options. We want them to have the tools and the skills, and we want them to take advantage of everything that we have to offer. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation, sharing your knowledge with our students, and just really passing it forward.
I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you.
To be here. I truly appreciate the opportunity, and what you guys are doing. I hope the students understand how impactful what you guys are doing for them can be to their lives.
Awesome.
Well, we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Who's Next Innovators Edition.